It started with something as simple as a wooden fence. A fence meant to mark boundaries, keep things private, and give a family peace in their own backyard. But in this neighborhood, peace was the last thing the HOA wanted. Within days of putting it up, the homeowner found themselves buried under threats, fines, and endless demands to tear it down. What began as a harmless improvement quickly spiraled into the pettiest, most personal battle the HOA had ever waged. The real question is, who would win this fight? Before the conflict, Alex Johnson's life was almost painfully normal. He and his wife Emily had moved to Oakridge Estates 5 years earlier, looking for stability after bouncing between rentals. The neighborhood was picture perfect. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, kids riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on. It wasn't just a house they'd bought, it was a home. Alex worked in IT at a nearby firm, while Emily managed a small photography business from home. Their 8-year-old son Max filled the house with the kind of energy only a child could bring. Saturday mornings meant pancakes at the kitchen island. Summer evenings meant barbecues in the backyard with their golden retriever, Buddy, waiting hopefully for scraps. Like many families in Oakridge, they paid their dues to the HOA without much thought. The fees kept the pool open, the playground clean, and the holiday lights twinkling every December. At least that was the idea. But beneath the polished surface of Oakridge Estates lay a current of quiet tension. The HOA board, led by a woman named Margaret, had a reputation for being strict. She was the type who measured grass with a ruler and took pictures of trash cans left at the curb a minute too long. People grumbled about her in private, but no one really challenged her, not openly. For Alex and his family, life carried on mostly untouched by all that, until one spring morning when Emily mentioned wanting more privacy in the yard. "It'd be nice," she said, "if Max could play without the neighbor's windows staring down at us." That's when Alex got the idea for a fence. Nothing extravagant, just a 4-foot wooden fence, stained to match the house, well within the HOA's guidelines. At least, that's what he thought. Little did he know, that fence was about to change everything. Alex stared at the HOA letter in disbelief. It was worded in that cold, bureaucratic tone that seemed designed to intimidate. Immediate removal, non-compliance, violation of community standards. He felt his pulse quicken as he held the paper tighter, the edges crumpling in his hands. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, laying the letter flat on the kitchen counter for Emily to read. Emily skimmed it, frowning. "But you followed the rules exactly. We both went over them twice." She was right. The bylaws were clear. Fences were allowed, provided they matched specific guidelines. Alex's fence was standard wood, just the right height, and had been placed exactly on the property line. There was no gray area, no loophole. And yet, here it was, a demand that he tear it down. Alex decided to call the HOA office directly, hoping this was some clerical error. But when the receptionist transferred him to Margaret herself, he knew the conversation was about to spiral. Margaret's voice carried that clipped, condescending tone she had mastered so well. "Mr. Johnson, your fence has been deemed out of alignment with the community's visual integrity. It disrupts the flow of property lines." Alex's jaw clenched. "Out of alignment? Margaret, it's exactly on the property line. I measured it myself, twice." "That may be your belief," she replied smoothly, "but the board has reviewed it and the decision stands. You have 14 days to remove it or fines will be issued." Click. She hung up. The first fine came 2 weeks later. A crisp envelope arrived in the mail, demanding $150 for continued non-compliance. Alex's frustration turned into anger. This wasn't about offense. This was about control. He tried reasoning with her at the next HOA meeting. The board members sat in a stiff row at a long folding table in the community center. Margaret sat in the middle, like a queen presiding over her court. Alex stood, holding photos and measurements. Here's proof the fence meets the exact requirements listed in the HOA bylaws. Height, 4 feet. Approved material. Placement, right on the survey line. I don't see how this is a violation. The board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Margaret finally leaned forward, lips curling into something between a smile and a sneer. Mr. Johnson, this board reserves the right to interpret the guidelines in the best interest of community aesthetics. And in our judgment, your fence fails that standard. Her words landed like a hammer. Alex wanted to argue, to shout, but he could see in their eyes it was pointless. The board wasn't going to side with him, not while Margaret ran the show. More fines followed. $300, $500. The numbers stacked up like bricks being laid to box him in. The notices warned that if unpaid, the HOA could place a lien on his property. The thought of losing his home over a fence made Alex's stomach twist. Emily urged him not to give up. "We can fight this. You're right, and you know it. They're just trying to scare us." So Alex fought back. He filed a formal appeal, sending documents and photos. Weeks later, the appeal was denied with a single sentence: violation upheld. The harassment escalated. Margaret began driving past their house slowly, glaring at the fence. Other board members started leaving courtesy reminders on their door, citing random issues. The grass was half an inch too tall. Their trash can was visible from the street. Their holiday decorations lingered too long. Each notice felt like a deliberate attack, piling on to the growing weight of frustration. The Johnsons' neighbors began to notice. Some offered quiet words of sympathy. "We know she's targeting you. She's done it before." Others avoided them altogether, not wanting to get caught in Margaret's crosshairs. Max, only 10, picked up on the tension. He asked one evening, "Dad, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" Alex knelt down, hugging him tightly. "No, buddy, we didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't like it when others stand up to them." But even Alex's confidence was being tested. Every new envelope in the mailbox made his heart race. The fines had now climbed past $2,000. The threat of legal action loomed closer with every week. He began documenting everything: photos, letters, dates, even videos of Margaret stopping in front of his house. If they were going to war, he was determined to be ready. Then came the breaking point. One morning, Alex woke up to find a bright orange notice taped to his front door. It wasn't a fine, it was a final warning. If the fence wasn't removed within 7 days, the HOA would take appropriate action, including but not limited to legal recourse and forced removal at the homeowner's expense. Emily read it, her hands trembling. Forced removal? They can't just come on to our property and tear it down, can they? Alex wasn't sure, and that uncertainty ate at him. That night, as he sat at his desk surrounded by a stack of HOA letters, he felt the crushing weight of helplessness. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about his right to live in peace, to enjoy the home he worked hard to buy, and he wasn't going to let Margaret take that away. The next day, Alex filed a complaint with a property rights attorney. The lawyer reviewed the documents, shaking his head. "They're bluffing. The bylaws are on your side, but people like this, they thrive on intimidation. They think no one will push back. If you want to fight, we can fight." For the first time in weeks, Alex felt hope. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood that Alex had hired legal help. Some residents cheered him on quietly, others whispered behind closed doors. But Margaret? She doubled down. At the next board meeting, she announced that troublemakers who refused to follow community rules would face serious consequences. Her eyes flicked directly to Alex. The tension in the room was suffocating. Alex knew the battle lines were drawn. But just when he thought things couldn't get worse,
They did. One morning, Alex Howard came home to find part of his fence vandalized. Several slats had been kicked in, splintered wood scattered across the grass. Max stood on the porch, wide-eyed, clutching the family dog. "Dad, someone broke our fence!" Alex's blood boiled. He knew exactly who was behind this. Maybe not directly, but Margaret's campaign had clearly emboldened someone. This was no longer just petty fines or letters. This was intimidation made physical. He called the police, filed a report, and added it to his growing case file. But deep down, he knew the real showdown was coming. The HOA had pushed him to his limit, and Alex was done playing defense. The Johnsons prepared for the fight of their lives, one that would expose the cracks in Oakridge Estates and reveal just how far people would go to control their neighbors. And when the truth came out, Margaret would regret ever starting this war.
The morning of the HOA's final meeting felt like the calm before a storm. Alex woke early, pacing the kitchen with a mug of coffee he barely touched. The papers sat neatly on the counter. Photographs, survey maps, measurements, letters, police reports, even copies of the vandalism complaint. Every piece of evidence carefully stacked, waiting to be unleashed. Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Today changes everything. The community center buzzed with tension that evening. Chairs filled quickly as residents filed in, whispering to each other. The air was charged with curiosity, even fear. Everyone knew this meeting wasn't routine. It was about Alex, Margaret, and the fence that had split Oakridge Estates into camps. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, stiff and expressionless. Margaret, as always, positioned in the center, chin lifted, radiating authority. Her eyes locked on Alex the moment he entered, her stare sharp as a blade. When the meeting opened, Margaret wasted no time. The first order of business is the continued violation by Mr. Johnson concerning his unauthorized fence. Her voice carried across the room, cold and certain. Despite multiple warnings, fines, and final notices, Mr. Johnson has refused compliance. The board will now vote to authorize legal action. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alex stood, holding his file. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. Before you vote, the community deserves to hear the full story. Margaret smirked, clearly eager to shut him down. Mr. Johnson, this isn't a courtroom. That's where you're wrong, Alex cut in, his voice sharp, because this is exactly like a courtroom when you threaten to take someone's home. And unlike you, I came prepared. He walked to the front, dropping his stack of papers onto the table with a heavy thud. The sound silenced the room. Here are the HOA bylaws. Section 4, Paragraph 2. Fences are permitted if constructed with approved materials, 4 feet in height, and within property boundaries. My fence checks every box. Here are the photographs. Here are the measurements verified by a licensed surveyor. Here's the approval slip from the contractor. He laid each piece down like evidence in a trial, his voice gaining momentum. Residents leaned forward, captivated. And here, Alex continued, holding up another page, are the fines you issued despite my compliance. And here's the police report. After part of my fence was vandalized. That didn't happen until after your campaign of harassment began. You didn't just target my property, you put my family in danger. The room erupted in whispers, eyes darting between Alex and Margaret. Margaret's face flushed, but she forced a laugh. Mr. Johnson, this is dramatic but irrelevant. The board has the right to interpret the rules for the good of the community. No, Alex shot back. The board has the right to enforce the rules as they are written. And when you go beyond that, when you twist them to suit your own bias, you're not protecting the community, you're abusing your power. Gasps filled the room. Even some board members shifted uncomfortably. Margaret tried to regain control. Order, order please, but her voice cracked under the weight of the moment. Alex wasn't finished. He pulled out one last sheet, the trump card. This is a letter from my attorney. It states that if you pursue legal action against me, we will file a countersuit for harassment, unlawful fines, and defamation. And based on the evidence I've collected, you will lose." The silence that followed was electric. Margaret's confident mask slipped for the first time, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing. A resident in the back stood up. "He's right. The fence is fine. We all know it. Why are we wasting everyone's time and money?" Another voice chimed in. "This has gone too far. He's not the problem. The board is." One by one, neighbors began speaking, their voices rising in support of Alex. The tide was turning in real time. The once intimidating presence of the board suddenly looked small, cornered, exposed. Margaret pounded the gavel, desperate to regain control. Enough! This meeting will not devolve into chaos. But chaos had already arrived, and this time it wasn't on her side. Alex leaned forward, his final words calm but devastating. "This ends tonight. Either you admit you were wrong and drop every fine, or we take this fight to court, where your power means nothing." The board sat frozen, eyes darting nervously between Margaret and the restless crowd. Margaret's hands trembled as she adjusted her papers, realizing she had lost. The vote never happened. The meeting ended in shouts and murmurs, residents surrounding Alex, shaking his hand, thanking him. Margaret stormed out, her once iron grip over Oakridge Estates shattered. For the first time in months, Alex felt the crushing weight lift. The fight wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about standing up, about refusing to be bullied, and he had won the turning point.
In the days after the meeting, Oakridge Estates felt different. Neighbors who had once avoided Alex now waved at him, stopping to talk when they saw him outside. Some admitted they'd been too afraid to speak up before. Others confessed they'd been fined or harassed in the past, but never fought back. Alex had done what most hadn't dared, to challenge Margaret openly and win. The board, under pressure, quietly rescinded the fines. The official letter of apology never came, but the silence spoke volumes. Margaret, however, wasn't ready to let go of her control so easily. She tried to spin the narrative, telling anyone who would listen that Alex had disrespected the community and created division. But her words fell flat. The damage was done. Her power had cracked, and everyone could see it. A few months later, an election was held for new board members. For years, Margaret had run unopposed, her name a fixture on every ballot. But this time was different. Several residents stepped forward, inspired by Alex's stand. Campaign signs popped up around the neighborhood, fresh voices for Oakridge and time for change. On election night, the results came in. Margaret was voted out, along with two of her closest allies. The board was reshaped almost overnight, filled with people who actually cared about fairness, not control. When Alex heard the news, he felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. He hadn't just saved his fence, he'd changed the course of the entire neighborhood. Life at home slowly returned to normal. The fence stood strong, a quiet reminder of the battle they'd fought. Max played in the yard without worry, Emily gardened without glancing over her shoulder, and Alex finally enjoyed his coffee without the dread of another envelope in the mailbox. But the impact reached further than their yard. The story of the fence fight spread beyond Oakridge Estates. Nearby communities heard about it, sparking conversations about HOA abuse and the importance of knowing your rights. For Alex, the biggest lesson wasn't about fences or fines. It was about resilience, about refusing to let fear dictate your choices, and about the power of one person standing firm even when the odds feel impossible. The video of that HOA meeting, secretly recorded by a resident, even circulated online, racking up thousands of views. In it, you could see Margaret's composure shatter, Alex's steady defiance, and the exact moment the crowd turned. Strangers from across the country commented, cheering him on, sharing their own HOA horror stories. It turned out the Johnsons weren't alone at all. Their fight tapped into something bigger, the universal frustration of being pushed around by petty authority figures who misuse power. And while Alex never wanted to be a symbol of anything, he realized he had become one, not just for his family, but for everyone who believed in standing up when something was wrong. In the end, the fence dispute became the most petty HOA fight Oakridge had ever seen, but also the most important, because it reminded people that sometimes the smallest battles reveal the biggest truths. Alex often reflected on it while walking past the fence. The wood slats, weathered slightly by time, weren't just a boundary anymore. They were a monument to perseverance, to courage, to never backing down when it mattered most. And maybe that was the real victory. Not the board's retreat, not Margaret's fall from power, not even the fence itself, but the knowledge that his family could live freely, without intimidation, in the home they loved. "Funny," Alex once said to Emily with a quiet smile. "All this over a fence." Emily laughed softly, slipping her hand into his. "Not just a fence, our fence."
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.